What does the final form of the monster trio look like? Because I don't think we're that far off from it. But I am certain that Oda has more in his bag to upgrade the monster trio. So in this video, we're going to be discussing what the final forms of the monster trio is going to look like. Haki improvements, black blades, new attacks, everything that's going to make up the final forms of the monster trio. As always, if you enjoy content like this, make sure you subscribe and join our King Pirates crew. And also thank you to Skillshare for sponsoring this video, but more on that later. But to start things off, let's start off with our guy Luffy, because it's honestly very impressive how far he's come already, and it's kind of hard to imagine what else is even next. Of course, in the manga, he's taken a monster step forward. He's awakened his devil fruit, seemingly defeated Kaido. But I think from what we've seen so far, we should really appreciate how much stronger Luffy has gotten. Like, a lot of people have gassed up Kaido and how much damage he's taken and dealt, and rightfully so. But Luffy has also been going at it with Kaido for quite a long time. He's taken and dealt a ton of damage himself, and a lot of it has been off panel. So I think at this point, it's pretty much a fact that Luffy is already one of the strongest people in the world. But of course, that doesn't mean he can't improve even more. So what exactly is the final version of him gonna look like? And well, personally, I pretty consistently said that I think the final form of Luffy is gonna be the GOAT, and he's gonna be the strongest. And honestly, I think the next big step for him is just to polish his skills. And that starts off with his stamina, which I know is a pretty boring answer. But as strong as Gear 5th is right now, Luffy definitely doesn't have the exact same control that he does with other forms. Even with Gear 4th, he has that stamina issue that he still showcased recently. I think right now Gear 4th and Gear 5th are kind of like Gear 2nd and Gear 3rd when they were first introduced during Enies Lobby. Back then, they were incredibly strong power-ups, but they also had their drawbacks. But of course, after the time skip, Luffy pretty much got rid of all of those drawbacks, and he was in full control of both forms. So I think the next step for him is to get Gear 4th and Gear 5th to that same level. Because right now, it feels like he's fighting kind of randomly and just purely off instincts. That's why he's taken a ton of damage from Kaido. A lot of his big attacks haven't even landed. In a weird way, it's almost slightly unimpressive because it's so messy and he just keeps messing up all the time. But at the same time, we do have to acknowledge the durability and damage that he can deal and take in Gear 5th, because ever since he's gone awakening, he's taken a ton of damage from Ragnaroks and Burrow Blasts and Thunder Bagwas. But this whole time, he's been still kind of just holding up pretty strong. So when you look at the potential of Gear 5th combined with everything that he's mastered with Haki, it's incredibly high what Luffy can accomplish. The ability he has now to just interact with lightning opens up so many different possibilities. Of course, we saw him throw one, but maybe he could combine it with other attacks. He could definitely do better to create more combinations and use his environment to his advantage a little more. But of course, the most ridiculous power he has is pretty much the ability to shapeshift. As we saw, he can just go full giant form now, but what if he's also able to combine that with like aspects of Gear 4th? Actually, in a way, we kind of did just see that, because that giant fist that he just used was pretty much a gigantic Kong gun. So if he's able to do that, I don't see why he's not able to use other Gear 4th attacks. Like, imagine a giant Kong Gatling. Maybe he's able to combine other forms as well, like Snake Man and Tank Man, to have more speed in giant form, or just have this really tanky version of himself. But at the end of the day, I think the final form of Luffy really comes down to him controlling things. Because Haki-wise, I think he's pretty much tapped out and just peaked. Like, this man's pretty much mastered every single bit of Haki you can. So I think for the first time in a while, Luffy's improvement is going to be solely focused on Devil Fruit. And that makes a ton of sense, because I think the fight against Blackbeard is going to be incredibly Devil Fruit focused. Of course, incredibly high level Haki is still going to be used, but it's almost like the base level of entry for that fight. But yeah, overall, I'm just really excited to see the destructive power that Luffy can reach by the end of the story, because when we get to that final war, that final arc, there's going to be the national treasure of Marijois involved and ancient weapons. I'm not expecting Luffy to be as strong as an ancient weapon, but he might just have to do one or two things that are at that same level, which is crazy to think about, but he's my GOAT and I believe in him. Alright, but next up, we're going to be talking about Zoro, but first I want to let you guys know about Skillshare, because just like the Straw Hats, you can power up your skills with Skillshare. If you didn't know already, Skillshare is an online learning community with thousands of online classes and members across 150 countries, and it's one of the best places to get inspired and learn new skills, whether for a hobby, your business, or a side hustle. With their premium membership, you get access to every single class available, and personally, I've taken a ton of Skillshare classes, because when I first started growing this YouTube channel, I really wanted to develop my skills and learn more about the platform, and Skillshare was the place where I found a lot of useful classes. In fact, some of the biggest YouTubers have created incredibly helpful classes on Skillshare. For example, Ali Abdaal has a great course called Video Editing with Final Cut Pro X from beginner to YouTuber. It was a very easy to follow class that not only showed beginners how to use Final Cut Pro, but it also had tips and shortcuts for experienced users like myself. So if you want to get started on Skillshare, there's an awesome deal for you guys. The first 1,000 people to use the link in the description will get a 1-month free trial of Skillshare. So go check out Skillshare with the link in the description and start start your journey today. And now back to the video. Alright, but next up we're gonna be talking about the right hand, and that is Zoro. And low-key, I'm more excited to see what the final version of Zoro looks like than Luffy, because I think Zoro still has a lot more potential to grow and maybe the most out of any Straw Hat. And one thing I always love discussing with Zoro is what his next sword is gonna be, but I did recently talk about that in a video, so you can check that out right here. But as far as Zoro's progression goes, it's actually pretty straightforward. It's gonna come down to Haki. Of course, recently we found out he has Conqueror's Haki, but he also was able to use Advanced Conqueror's Haki. I am a little uncertain how much he actually understands what he's actually doing. So honestly, the first step to his progression is pretty similar to Luffy. He just has to learn how to control his powers a little better. In an ideal world, he could just go up to Luffy and ask him about it, because Luffy actually has a pretty good understanding of it. But of course, the Straw Hats for some reason just never do that. Usopp learned about Observation Haki and didn't bring it up to anyone. Either way though, I fully expect Zoro to really figure out Advanced Conqueror's Haki eventually. I think the most interesting question here is whether or not Zoro's gonna get to Sky Splitting level, which when I first thought about it, my initial reaction was no, he probably doesn't need it. But then as I thought about it more, I thought, why not? Shanks has it, I think Mihawk probably has it, and Zoro's gonna surpass Mihawk, so why shouldn't he? So honestly, I think the final form of Zoro will be splitting skies, but I do think it's gonna take a while to get there. I think most likely it's gonna come in one of the final matchups. I think it's probably gonna happen against Mihawk. That just would be the most fitting fight for it to happen because of the progression that's been built up. Like, the reunion and fight of Luffy versus Shanks is probably the #1 thing people are looking forward to, because that's been something that's been literally built up since chapter 1. To see that little kid that Shanks gave the Straw Hat to now split the skies with him, that would be incredible. At the same time though, Zoro and Mihawk, that progression has been building up since Baradier. So to see that Zoro that got completely waxed by a baby carrot knife go and split the skies with Mihawk and defeat him, that would be incredibly satisfying as well. Which is why I just never get the idea of Shiryu coming in and defeating Mihawk and taking that fight away. But yeah, I fully expect Zoro not only to fight Mihawk, but also reach that sky splitting level. As far as other final power-ups goes, I think Black Blades are definitely necessary. It will be interesting to see whether or not Oda gives him 3 Black Blades, because that is kind of crazy if you think about it. We've only literally seen 2 of them in the entire story, and Zoro could get 3 himself. So I think it's entirely possible that he doesn't turn all of his swords black, but I would really love to see it. At the end of the day, it's gonna depend on why the blades are turned black. We did get an explanation from Hitetsu and Onimaru that Black Blades are turned black through like countless battles. But at the same time, those are very vague descriptions and could be just passed down rumors. If it really turns out to be the case that he needs to go through like countless battles to turn a blade black, he might only get the Wado Ichimonji turned black and possibly Enma. But I can also see a scenario where all it takes is like one gigantic Haki clash of equal high levels to turn a blade black, which in that case Zoro will obviously have 3 Black Blades. Besides that though, I'm still incredibly curious on what Oda is doing with this whole Grim Reaper thing. I did recently do a video on it, you can check that out right here, just laying out like all the possibilities that I believe in. But at the end of the day, there's really not one option that I'm confident in. It could be Haki, it could be related to Black Blades, it could be just ghosts. So it's kind of impossible to tell what's going on over there right now, but I feel like he's going to be stronger by the end of it. But overall, with Final Form Zoro, I see him splitting the skies and with a Black Blade, if not multiple. With that said though, let's talk about our final Monster Trio member, and that is Sanji. And I honestly think this one's pretty straightforward, because with his new Germa jeans and Ifrit Jambe, I think he's pretty close to his final form already. The final step that I think he takes is taking his Observation Haki to a crazy level, because as far as his Germa jeans and Ifrit Jambe goes, once again, I think he just needs to understand them a little more and just get them under control. But as for his final power-up of taking Observation Haki probably to a future sight level, I think that happens against Kizaru. Once again, this is something I recently talked about in its own video, you can check that out right here. But yeah, Sanji versus Kizaru might be the fight I'm looking forward to the most for Sanji, and it might not even happen, so I could be setting myself up here for disappointment, but I really think that fight makes sense. With Sanji's speed and Observation Haki, Kizaru just feels like the perfect opponent for him, and I think it's the perfect fight for him to really elevate his Observation Haki to that final level, which is likely future sight. Now of course it could be something else completely, more just mentioned before, like the possibility of sealing his presence. He's also really good with judging people's emotions, so maybe it goes in that direction, and it's also possible that maybe he unlocks future sight and it's on like a whole nother level. But ultimately, I really think Observation Haki is like the last final thing for Sanji to level up. Now that he doesn't have the raid suit, I don't really see any other direction that he can really improve. Armament Haki was one thing that I always wanted to see more out of Sanji. But at this point, I think it's pretty clear that Oda wants to focus on him getting hotter flames, which honestly was more dope because Ifrit Jambe looks fire. So as far as the final version of Sanji goes, I think he's going to show us a crazy new level of Observation Haki. And in my hand, I have a One Piece volume between 90 and 95. If you guess it wrong, you have to like, subscribe, and watch the next video. And the answer is 90.